converted man here. Okay, time to complain about a thing. Every now and then I'll see this statement about science that it can't answer the why. And lately I got an email. I've been in this email exchange with this guy from YouTube. And this is what he said, part of what he said in the email. And I'll read that and go over why it's dumb and why the idea that science can't answer the why doesn't matter and things of that nature. Okay, so what is not empirical, bonjour, Luke says, is by definition beyond the scope and so is beyond the ability to find the answer. Okay, well, what is beyond empirical? Like, example, the guy gave the example of relationships as not being empirical, which of course they are. So he didn't have any examples of something not empirical. Anyways, for instance, it can tell us how the physical universe works, but it cannot tell us why it is there. Well, it kind of can, because it's really the same thing, isn't it? The how it works is also the why. Like, well, but why is gravity there? Or why it is comprehensible to us? That is beyond empirical data to relate. So basically, science can't answer the why. Boo, bleeping who. It doesn't matter, not even a little bit. So science can do all these other things. Yeah, sure, but it can't answer this one question. So, therefore, we need something else to answer that question because it can't do this thing. It's like, well, isn't that kind of like saying, well, hey, mathematics can't answer, what is delicious tonight. So, I'm going to have to use something else. Well, yeah. But why? I mean, it's so dumb. It's like, okay, well, what are you going to use to decide that? You're going to use some other system, right? You're still going to need a system, and it's still going to have to be a coherent system. The why question might not have an answer. Might be malformed. It might be misshapen. It might not even have an answer. It might not be a why to it. And that's the other thing about this question. Well, the science can't answer the why. So what? It doesn't matter, not even a little, not a damn bit. Doesn't matter. If it can answer all these other questions, isn't that good enough? Like, okay, it can answer all these other things. Okay, well then that's a pretty good system, isn't it? At least it's a system. And as far as assuming there's a why is akin to what young kids do. And there's even been research to back this up to some degree. So I'll put that link in the description of this video. But let's see if I can share it right now. Let's see. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, so why are rocks pointy? So there's children have a preference for teleological explanations of the natural world. And then this whole paper explains this. So basically you ask the kids, well, why is that rock pointy? Is it there so that an animal, I've heard it said as a bear, a bear can scratch itself, or is it just there? Well, the rock is pointy just because it's pointy. It's not there for any other, there isn't a why. There's not an intention behind it. So asking, well, why is the universe here, assumes to some degree that there's an answer to that. It assumes to some degree an answer that would presuppose intentionality. How did it get here? We can answer a lot of that. Now, what's interesting, of course, about the email itself was that he suggests that it can't be. Let me pull it back up here so I can. Here we go. It can't tell us why it's comprehensible to us. Actually, yes, science can indeed tell us why anything is comprehensible to us because it can study us. So that's wrong too. Of course, this was all his effort to dodge the burden of proof that he squarely had. But he also told me that he wasn't going to try to prove to me logically or scientifically that God existed. So I was like, well, then what's the point in talking to you? I mean, I was trying to convince you that you have blind faith and nothing but faith. That was what I was trying to do. What were you trying to do? Just tell me that you have a belief. Okay, I know that. And so what? All right, so science and math and logic are all tools that help us to figure out things. I've been reading this one really great paper about logic itself, a critique of the syllogistic. This is a Descartes, or however you want to say his name, but one of the things it says, and I completely agree, is that an argument, logic in and of itself, it cannot give you a new discovery. That's not what it's for. That's not what it does. Descartes, thank you. Can't say words. You can't just arbitrarily plug in things that you and get a result. Although, in a way, it seems like you can. Like intuitively, you look at the formulas of logic and you go, well, it's A, then B, then B, then C, then and there you go. And that's simple. Well, yes, but A has to lead to B and B has to lead to C or it doesn't work. How are you going to find out if that thing in and of itself is true? This is where the whole lobster meme came into existence at some point. Yeah, Rene. Yeah, there you go. That's easier to say than Descartes. So, yeah. Anyways, but so you have to know whether the things are true. So you're going to have to check in with reality. So I can make an argument, and it might, may or may not be valid. Premise one: lobsters exist. Premise two: either lobsters exist or my light is off. Lobsters exist, therefore my light is on. Well, my light is on, but that has nothing to do with the lobsters at all, So, well, how would you identify the fallacy in premise two? Because premise one, you go, okay, lobsters exist. Okay, that's true. We can examine that. We know that that's the case. What about the second one? Either lobsters exist or this thing is not this. Well, what connection is there? Because yes, it is something that the conclusion is true, but that doesn't matter because the second premise is flawed. So how is it flawed? And that's where you have to understand logic and syllogisms and fallacies and all that to be able to point it out. And you can do that. And then once you've done that, you go, well, what's interesting is that because of the fallacies, I actually have to be skeptical of the conclusion, despite knowing that my light is on. That doesn't matter. That's completely irrelevant. Within the system of logic, I would be compelled to be skeptical of the conclusion because the argument sucked, because it was bad and broken. Now, that is not to say that the conclusion is false. That's not what logic does either. And so when you have various apologists, for example, just to use the example that I like to use, making their various arguments for God or, afterlife or whatever other supernatural stuff they want to throw out there. You have multiple logical fallacies that happen. Well, why? Because the different premises were not checked in with reality. There wasn't a moment where they said, well, wait a minute. The first premise here, is that true? Do we know that that's true? Can we actually say that that's actually true? Or is this one of those cases where we're going to have to make it a hypothetical syllogism? Because then that's fine. HS, you can get away with all sorts of things there. But a modus ponens or a modus teleos, no, you can't. Or even a disjunctive syllogism, you can't really get away with a lot there either. What fallacy is it if you don't check your premise against reality? Well, in and of itself, it's hard to say without an example, because different things are going to come into existence depending on how you word your premise. So, take for an example. Let's see. Trying to think of an example from my own videos of when I did the KCA argument and I analyzed the bleep out of that. The first premise just isn't true, because it said, at least the version that I looked at, because there's other versions, I suppose, but it said, things that begin to exist. Well, hold on. Begin to exist. What do you mean begin to exist? What does that even mean? So isolating that in and of itself, begin to exist, has no meaning. There isn't anything that begins to exist. There is nothing that you can say, well, that began. No. Unless you're twisting those words in all sorts of weird ways, but then, of course, you're equivocating all over the place. The standard understood idea of begin to exist has to be something identifiable in reality. So what would that be? Can you point to something that begins to exist? And you might say, well, I began to exist. Well, did you? Well, when did you begin to exist? When you were born? When the atoms came together? And then as you change throughout time, does that mean more of you is coming into existence? What do you mean? And so the vagueness of these words, the ambiguity of these words, already poses multiple problems. And even if you want to say, well, okay, it was when, you say, well, let's just define it when the conception happened. When the sperm and egg met, that's when I began to exist. Okay, great. What else begins to exist? And then you have another problem, right? So, because it has to be consistent across the board, or it has no meaning. But they didn't bother with this in the Kalam. They just went about to the next premise as if that premise was fine. And so it gains multiple logical fallacies because of that. And so you want to avoid that, ideally. And the only way to do that is say, well, what can I say? I can say things that change into something else now gain the label that we will call them at some arbitrary point. That's pretty clunky, but at least it's closer to reality. Like, the clump of cells that we call the clump of cells, at some point we call a human. And of course, there's debate about when that is or when that should be. And then we say, well, then they gain sentience at some point. And then, they gain this attribute and that attribute. And some of that is fuzzy because of natural language, and some of it is set in stone, so to speak. Because we've said this is what the cutoff is. This is what makes a pebble a pebble. It has to be a certain size. So we do the similar thing for, humans. And those labels, of course, are complicated, and they're not simple. So when you go into your argumentation, you have to be aware that you will not be able to use logic to make a new discovery. That's not what it's for. To make a new discovery, you're going to have to probably use science. That's the only other tool that's available. Now, if you say, well, but that's not fair because there's things that I think might not be in the realm of science. There's this thing, I'm going to pretend that there's something outside and beyond the scope of the empirical. Okay, so there's no way to prove that it is so. There's no test for it. Right. There's no way to prove that it's so. Yeah, but it exists. Well, yes. Well, what do you mean by that? Because I'll grant that Jar Jar Binks exists, but he exists in a different way than you and I exist. He isn't the same as the person behind Deconverted Man is. In fact, Deconverted Man is just a placeholder for my actual name, which I prefer not to reveal to the public. Unless they're super special awesome, and then they get to know it because they're a friend of mine. But other than that, it's an avatar. It's not who I am. And even my name isn't really, that's my name, but it's not who I am. So who am I? And oh man, that's a hard, Well, science doesn't answer that question. Well, but it answers a lot of that question, but it doesn't answer all of it. So what? That doesn't matter. We know it works. So we'll use it, and then we'll go, well, we don't know on that bit. Can we use logic on that? No, probably not. Let's try. Okay, that didn't work. All right, now what? Well, we've got two systems that we know of that work reliably and testably. We have science, and that works on the world that we know about, the world that is here, and we have logic for the more sort of technical, sort of maybe philosophical ideas that are out there that we can utilize either of these tools to decide whether or not it's something that is, or it's something that we should at least doubt. What is the test? Yeah, that's a great one. What is the test for the things that can't be proved? Right, there isn't one. So it's magic. That's what you're talking about. If you are talking about something that cannot be tested at all, that has no way to prove it, there's no, math is also, I would say mathematics also in the field of science in reference to this particular thing. Yes, using mathematical logic to prove black holes would also work as far as proof goes. My point here is to those that say the thing that the title of this, which is, why science can't explain the why and why that doesn't mean a damn thing, is that it works on all these other questions that we have. And then if you run out of the ability to use science on it, because people go, oh, it's scientism. If you just say that science is the only way to know things, then you've refuted yourself because that phrase cannot be discovered by science. Great. I can fix that for you. Except for this sentence, everything can be proven by science. Now what? Well, but then it contains a logical fallacy. That doesn't matter. I could fix that. And the sentence is immune to logical fallacies. Now what? Oh, well, but that's, you can't just do that. Well, no, but I did. I said that the sentence, other than this sentence, everything can be proven by science. Also, this sentence is immune to logical fallacies. Well, now what? You say, well, but yeah, you can't. Yeah, well, but what about luck? No, yeah, I made it immune. So there's a way around it. But of course, it's silly because we like logic. Hopefully, we want to use logic. We want to be reasonable people. But when you want to invoke this ether of something more than what science can probe, oftentimes and many times, you are simply evoking the non-existent, or if it does exist, there would be no way to know it. What is not empirical by definition, and here's an interesting thing, of course, by definition, that's an interesting point, beyond the scope of science. Okay. So what is something that's non-empirical? How would you know what that is? What are you even talking about? Because sure, it's an abstract idea. Okay, like I guess you could say this. You could say this. This works. Now what is that? You can say, well, it's the number 1. Yeah, but does it exist? Well, yes, but does it exist in the same way that you and I do? It's not a physical object. Well, but it's still, okay, well, what is it? It's an abstract object of the mind. It exists in my brain and your brain, and that's it. So, if we are indeed talking about that, and that is something that is not empirical, which is an object of the mind, and that is beyond the scope of science, even though I would say it's not beyond the scope of science, but and it is just in the mind, right? It would just be in the mind. It wouldn't be anywhere else. So in the email where he was using this fact that science can't answer the why as a reason to then insert God, I guess, then God is an object of the mind. And that's it. That's where God is. And I'd be fine with that because that's where I think God exists, is in the mind of humans and nowhere else. Now, if I say that about goblins and ogres and dragons, nobody gets perturbed. Nobody gets upset. Nobody flies off the rail. I suppose somebody out there has a belief in one of those 3 things, so maybe somebody would. But I hope maybe I'll encounter them one day. You never know. I mean, I did encounter a guy that said aliens are basically God. So whatever. I don't know anything at this point. So goblins, ogres, and dragons don't exist, and I can say that and not have a burden of proof at all. But if I say God doesn't exist, people fly off the handles. Because enough people believe in this to make it something that you have to refute. Not enough people believe in goblins, ogres, and dragons to bother refuting them. Sometimes we'll get the, why do you talk about God so much when you don't believe in it? Because you do. That's why. And because perhaps we should try to not believe in things unless we have some sort of methodology to show that those things are true. So, yes, science might not have the answer to the why, but there also might not be an answer to the why. And also that doesn't give you an excuse to not use science to show that your thing is true. It doesn't give you an excuse to not use logic to at least give us a reason to think that it might be true. The burden of proof is still and will always remain on whoever makes the claim about whatever it is. So, it doesn't matter, not even a little, that science can't answer the why. Did I have a logical argument here? I could reduce it to a syllogism, but I won't because my brain has decided to turn off. So I'll leave it to you. Yeah, that's it. That was my point from the whole beginning. Yes, it will be up to you to come up with the syllogism for everything I said. Aha! It's homework, you see. I'm teaching you. No, it's not me being lazy. What are you talking about? No. It's not that I didn't plan this. You know, this is the part of the video where I fade away when I'm editing. But since I'm doing it live, I have to, I'm slowly fade away as I rant myself into oblivion. And then it's also, it's fine when I do it, but it's not okay when you. And I say Finn in the chat, and then I close the thing. I could talk about this other thing, but I wonder, should I start a new stream for it? And I want to start a new stream for it. Yeah, I'll do that. Finn, goodbye. Press the button. Thanks for watching. Comment below. Stop. Well, I can't explain. No, I can't go over it again. No, eat me. No, I'm ending the video. There you go. Be skeptical of the things. This was the thing I did. Don't be skeptical of this thing. Oh, wait. Oh, bleep. I'm going to do another hangout. It's going to be about something else. So join me then if you want. Bye.